Jerry? Jerry, have seated?
Everyone else can be seated. Counsel for Defendant Wayne Greenlaw, wish to cross-examine Investigator Ford.
Thank you very much. Investigator Ford, good afternoon. I want to start with, we just got through looking at two videos, and in one of those we saw Mr. Ray Greenlaw, and how would you have described how he was responding to you?
Ray Greenlaw?
Yes.
I think he was responding well. At times, I don't know that he was responding truthfully to everything.
I got that. I mean, he may or may not have been doing that from your perspective, but did he seem to be able to answer your questions? Was he alert, those sort of
Yes, sir.
things? Now, in comparison, you saw the video of Mr. Wayne Greenlaw.
Yes.
How would you compare the two or contrast?
Similar. He seemed to answer the questions. He seemed to kind of avoiding some of the questions as well.
Did he seem to you that he might have been under the influence of alcohol or medications?
Sure. Sure.
Now, I know that at several different places you addressed that. Do you recall asking him about his consumption of alcohol?
Yes, sir.
And do you remember what he told you about his consumption of alcohol?
I believe it was a six-pack or a little more than a six-pack, something like that.
More than a six-pack? Is that kind of refresh your recollection?
Yeah.
And in addition to that, he had drank some rum.
I believe he said he had a shot of rum as well.
Now, that's what he said in one response. Did you inquire of him about when he may have started drinking?
I don't believe he was asked, or at least that I recall.
Yeah, I don't think so either. And how about when he may have stopped drinking?
I don't believe that was asked as well.
Now, in addition to consuming alcohol, you asked about medications that he was taking, and I believe that he responded that in fact he was taking medications.
Yes, I believe he said he took the Xanax and Zoloft, and he was out of the, whatever it was for the back.
Lord, it may have been. Did you ask him when it was that he may have last taken those?
When he had last taken those?
Yes.
No.
You said, and I'm not sure about the exact amount of time, though, that he may have fallen asleep or taken a nap or something along those lines in the police car.
Correct.
When he was in the police car, was he in handcuffs?
Honestly, I don't recall. I would presume that he was. I believe he was cuffed on scene, and I would say that he probably was.
How long do you think, and you may not know the answer to this question, how long do you think that he may have taken a nap?
Well, I wasn't out there to watch him, so I can't say specifically a time, but I can tell you that based off of the end of Ray's interview where Chuck said it was 1 o'clock or 1300, I believe we got to the office, I want to say it was around 9. So you'd be looking at about a 4-hour period, give or take, that he would have the opportunity to be asleep.
And you don't know how long that may have been?
No, I wasn't out there with him watching.
No. Other than whatever time that he would have had to take that nap, do you have any idea when the last time it was that he may have slept before that?
No, I'm not aware.
Did no indication based on any of the witnesses that you may have interviewed in this case that he slept at all during the preceding night, was there?
I don't know if he'd been asleep the night before or not. I'm not sure what time. I don't know if he's a night person, if he's up at night, or if he's up during the day. I don't know his sleeping habits.
Well, I understand that. My question was, in talking to other witnesses about this case, had they given you some information about what he was doing during the preceding evening hours?
Oh, they had a, I want to say a bonfire, but like a fire pit. Is where I was looking for. I believe they said, I think it was Scott Searles that said they had a fire pit going that evening. We're hanging out outside.
And I believe Mr. Searles indicated, did he not, that somewhere around 5 o'clock on the preceding afternoon, they were out by the fire pit and they started drinking.
I believe that's correct, yes.
And we know that they were out drinking until Mr. Searles left, and Mr. Searles left somewhere in between 10 to 12 o'clock, who knows exactly. But they were drinking for that period of time, according to him.
Right.
We know that the first time that the two gentlemen that are involved in this came in, they were drinking then.
Yes.
And after that, you don't know, except that Mr. Searles came back, and didn't he also say that when he came back, they parked the Jeep out in the backyard and they were out by the bonfire drinking again?
I believe so. When he came back with Ms. Walls?
Yes.
Yes.
So, based on what you know about this case, at a minimum, he would have started drinking sometime around 5 o'clock the preceding afternoon, had been drinking all night into the morning.
Sure.
And obviously, you can't drink if you're asleep, so he's up during those hours. Okay. Do you recall that during the course of that interview that he said that he was groggy,
Yes.
and that he said that he was foggy?
I don't remember the foggy, but he may have. I'd have to.
You've got your interview in front of you, do you not?
Yes, I do.
Go to page 36, line 3 through 6, if you would, and see if that might help refresh your recollection.
No.
Is that the right spot?
Yes.
That helped refresh your recollection that he said that he was
Yes.
foggy?
Yeah, he said, I think the question was, were they still on the property? He said, I believe so, but it's all kind of foggy.
And he said that things were fuzzy on page 49. Lines 25, I think. Yeah. And then over to page 51, he said that things were scattered.
I see it. Things are kind of scattered. I believe it's right up front. Things are kind of scattered.
Yeah. So, would it be fair to say that it appeared that his ability to recollect the events of that night appeared to be a little fuzzy?
Were they fuzzy, or is he just?
Well, I'm asking you for your perspective.
From my perspective, it didn't appear that he was having any trouble recollecting the answers that he wanted to recollect.
All right. Now, on page 24 of this, you had been asking a lot of questions, and some of it had already involved some of the things that we were talking about, specifically over, earlier on that page, he had told you about his consumption of alcohol, and on pages 9 and 10, you talked about his medications. You get over to page 24, and it seems to me that at or about that time, you asked him again for the second time if he had taken any narcotics. Why was it, and at that particular point in the interview, that you readdressed that issue?
Probably because he was saying he was having a hard time, the lines above it, I guess when I was coming out of the bathroom, it's hard to remember everything that was said. I asked him if he was taking narcotics last night.
And the bottom line is that I think that was probably along the lines that you were thinking and getting into that particular area. It seems to me that during the course of this, that he either said he could not remember or something along those lines on at least 15 different occasions. Would that be fairly consistent with what you just got through seeing?
Yes.
Now you get over to page 49, and on page 49, lines 14 and 15. You tell him, one, that you're leading into a break, but we're going to sit here until you get your mind clear and we get a clear understanding. Do you recall that?
Yes, I remember that being said.
And this is a little bit more than halfway through the interview, so about a quarter of the way through the interview, it seems to me that you may have some concern about his ability to remember, and that's why you started asking him about taking narcotics again. Roughly another quarter of the way through the interview, you revisit that issue and say, okay, we're going to take a break here until you get your mind clear. Did it appear to you at that point in time his mind was not clear?
I don't believe so. If you read through the whole interview, you'll see where we rehash the same stuff over and over. And every time we do, we get a little bit more of it.
Which is why I'm asking that question. You go on page 42, you go something to the effect, okay, we're getting a little bit at a time. Did it seem that you'd ask a question and you'd either get some response, I don't remember, I don't know, it's not clear, something along those lines, and he was jumping around a lot, wasn't he?
Correct.
I mean, you'd ask him a question and he'd answer the question with the answer to something that wasn't the question that you asked, right?
Right.
And you were, quite frankly, you were very patient. And so you're trying to work through and establish what happened. That's what you were trying to do,
Correct.
isn't it?
Correct.
And the bottom line is, the way to do that is kind of let's start at the beginning and kind of work our way through, right?
Correct.
And so you were trying to do that, weren't you?
Yes.
But you were having a really hard time doing it.
I would say it was a hard time. We were getting through it. But
Well, compared to what we saw with Ray, it was totally different, wasn't it?
it was different from Ray's, yes, definitely.
But at the end of the day, you already knew a lot of the facts going into this, right?
Correct.
You had already, either you or other people had already interviewed witnesses.
Yes.
Who had you interviewed?
I interviewed, while we were on scene, I interviewed David Royal.
Had you either spoken to Danny Meadow or had someone else spoken to him and talked to you about what Mr. Meadow was going to tell you?
I believe that was Investigator Sawicki that talked to Danny Meadow, I'm sure I'm mispronouncing the name, but he had talked with him, and then that would have been relayed to us. You probably saw Chuck getting up and leaving a few times.
Yeah.
That probably was those, the information being relayed to him at that point. Investigator Lee, sorry. Chuck.
Street's not very big out there at Aspen, and very shortly after all this took place, most of the people that were on that street had been interviewed, had they not?
I would say.
Yeah. Nicole Robinson had already been interviewed.
She was interviewed. I don't know what time everybody was interviewed, but I'm fairly confident that everybody got interviewed that day that was on the street.
Yeah, they've all been in, they've all testified, and I believe that most of them testified that they were interviewed prior to noon on that particular day. And my recollection is that Danny Meadow said that he was interviewed around 8 a.m. that morning.
It could be.
So you were already aware that the gentlemen who were involved in this had been to the Greenlaw house 2 times that morning, right?
Prior to us interviewing the Greenlaws, or?
Yeah, prior to interviewing the Greenlaws. As a matter of fact, on a number of occasions when you're speaking with Mr. Wayne Greenlaw, he's either unresponsive or unclear or doesn't remember the answer, and you keep telling him, listen, I know that they've been there twice.
Some of that information was gained from interviewing Ray Greenlaw. I don't know that I can't say that we got how many times they went to the Greenlaws from anybody that we'd interviewed on the street.
Well, I believe you may have gotten that information, and I think you may have said it from Scott Searle.
True, yeah.
And the bottom line is, both he and Kendra Walls had both already told you that, had they not?
They had, from what I recall from Mr. Searle's interview, I believe he said that the Greenlaws weren't there when he got there, the first time.
All right, but you had interviewed him, and the bottom line is, he's been here as well. So you were aware from other sources other than the Greenlaws that there was information out there that Mr. Riley and Mr. Levitt had been there twice that morning.
Yes.
And one of the things, as a matter of fact, that you questioned Mr. Wayne Greenlaw about was he was saying, well, I don't remember if they were, or I don't think they were. You're going, no. We know that they were there twice, right?
Okay, correct.
So the bottom line is this, is that you already knew that the victims in this case had been there twice.
Yes.
And you knew that there had been a dispute the first time that they had been there and that they had been asked to leave.
Correct.
Right?
Correct.
Now, at that particular point, you may have been a little fuzzy about why it was they were asked to leave, but I think you had a pretty good idea about that too, didn't you?
From what we're hearing, yeah, there was some, I think, some assumptions made as far as what went on in the house. We just kind of went with it to see what we would get.
And at the end of the day, the evidence would tell you that 2 different things took place there. One, there was the issue about them trying to sell drugs as a potential issue.
Correct.
And the second one was there was an argument over firearms there that morning. Is that right?
Correct.
And at some point in time, they were asked to leave. Is that right?
Yes.
And according to witnesses, they left.
Yes.
And they left in their truck.
Yes.
And they came back on foot.
Correct.
Right?
Correct.
And the bottom line is this, is that when they left the first time, there was no fight per se. They may have been arguing with each other, but nobody hit each other or anything along those lines, right?
Correct.
So there may have been some hard feelings, and there may have been some yelling and some cussing, but nobody had been hurt, nobody had been harmed.
Correct.
And then they came back later, but an intervening event was that Scott Searles and Kendra Walls had come in while they were gone.
Correct.
Right?
Correct.
And that's pretty much the facts, isn't it? I mean, as you know them to be today, and I believe you said that you have continued, and I believe it's the practice of most detectives to continue to find as many facts as you can find in a case as long as it's still pending. And we're still here, and I know you've been doing this a long time, and you're doing your job, and you've been trying to do that, right?
Yes.
So in the course of that, that's what you've determined about those events. They left the first time after a dispute, they left in their truck, they came back on foot. During the intervening time, Scott Searles and Kendra Walls had come in And both of those, in some way, shape, form, or fashion, may have witnessed something that took place there.
Yes,
Okay, would that be a fair statement?
that would be fair.
All right. And we also have other witnesses that have testified in addition to those. And we know that when the other two, Mr. Riley and Mr. Leverett, came back, that in fact there was a major dispute out in front of that house, don't we?
Yes,
And we know that because Nicole Robinson saw it,
correct.
and Diane Towsley saw it and heard it.
Correct.
And would it be fair to say that Diane Towsley's version of what she said took place matched almost identically to what Ray Greenlaw said?
As far as an argument out front, and Ray saying, this isn't your property, yes, I can't remember verbatim, but yeah, I remember hearing that in her interview.
Yeah. I mean, it down to the number of times. She said that he said it 4 times. He said it 4 times. They certainly didn't have a chance to get together and discuss it beforehand, did they?
Sure.
She said that during that period of time that there was a conversation that she heard that one person said, "I've got a gun," and the other one said, "So do I." Remember that?
They could, possibly.
And Mr. Ray Greenlaw said something about that today.
Right.
And even Wayne Greenlaw said something about that he had heard that conversation.
Right, right.
You also have learned over the course of this that in fact, what Wayne Greenlaw was saying appears to be true in terms of when that argument took place out there, that took place between Mr. Ray Greenlaw and the other 2 guys that had come back.
Right.
And that he in fact was not out there when it started, right?
Right.
And you have absolutely no reason to believe that he saw Ray Greenlaw hit whomever with a machete.
Right.
That he even knew that there was a machete hit. He didn't know. You don't have any evidence, do you, that maybe I'm unaware of, that Wayne Greenlaw knew that Justin Riley had been hit with a machete?
No.
So from Wayne Greenlaw's perspective, he's sitting there at his house, minding his own business that morning. He had been drinking way too much, but he hadn't done anything except sit there and have a bonfire and have a few beers. And according to him, and if you have evidence otherwise, let me know, that these 2 people came into his house without his permission.
That's what he says, yes.
Well, is there someone else that says differently?
I believe it was Ray Greenlaw that said that they were invited in, that he invited in, or possibly Wayne did.
Do you remember if it was Ray or Wayne that supposedly did that?
It was Ray that said it. As far as who invited him in, I think Ray, said that he thought Wayne did.
In any event, whether or not they were uninvited the first time, they actually did stay for a while. We know that, right?
Yeah.
I mean, that's not in dispute, is it?
No.
I mean, the bottom line is, maybe they did come in uninvited, maybe they didn't, but they did come in, and in some way, shape, form, or fashion, they spent a little while together, sitting around drinking, and for whatever reason, apparently the subject of either drugs and or guns came up, there was a dispute, and they were asked to leave. And that seems to be really not in debate, is it?
That seems to be
Okay.
good.
And the next time that they came, the second time they came, the evidence that you are aware of is that comports with the statement of Ray Greenlaw, which is verified by the statement of Ms. Diane Towsley, that in fact there was, as Mr. Wayne Greenlaw put it, all hell broke loose out there.
Yes.
Are you aware of anything that Ray Greenlaw did that would have started that kind of an argument at his front door?
according to Mr. Riley, Ray Greenlaw, when he stepped out, he hit him in the face with a beer bottle.
And we've seen Mr. Riley here in court. And, you know, that's why the jury will be the judge of what Mr. Riley had to say about the events. But other than that, where he said that he was hit by a beer ball, and that wasn't actually on the second time, because doesn't in fact Mr. Riley say that he never left?
I think you're correct.
Yeah. So he's talking about the first time that he was there, and we know from all the other evidence in this case that in fact that didn't happen, right?
Did he get hit with a beer bottle?
The first time.
The first time. It could be, his recollection of events can be a little, maybe off.
Well, talking about drinking, he had really been drinking that night, hadn't he?
Everybody in this case has been drinking.
But I mean, on the scale of everybody drinking, he may have been right up there at the top of the chart. He had been drinking a lot.
They all have.
Yeah. So there really isn't any debate about the events that led up to the warning shots being fired out in front of the house, is there?
I don't believe so.
Yeah, I don't think so either. It appears to me that, which is one of the reasons why this has been a very unique trial, where both the state and I both called joint witnesses, because all these witnesses all said the same thing. So it didn't make any difference if they were testifying for the state or if they were testifying for the defense. They were all testifying to the same thing, right?
Right.
And they didn't appear to have any agenda. Most of these people were people that just lived on the street, right?
Correct.
And said, you know, what they saw.
Correct.
Right? So that gets us to the point where warning shots are fired in this case. And at any point in time, even in Mr. Wayne Greenlaw's statement, which I contend that he was, you know, under the influence, but I understand your perspective.
I'm sorry, is that a question?
That was a preface to a question.
Okay, well, the comments need to be kept to a minimum, the questions need to be asked.
All right,
especially
very
the
good.
time frame that
At
was
any point in time, did Mr. Wayne Greenlaw deny that he fired 2 warning shots?
No.
And in fact, we know that he did fire 2 warning shots, don't we?
Yes.
Because we have a bunch of people that verified that
Right. And the shell casings.
in the shot case. Now, is there a dispute about the 3 warning shots that were fired?
As far as you lost me.
About the occurrence of them?
As far as whether there was 2 or whether there was 3.
Bad question, let's try again. Is there a dispute in the evidence from your perspective as to whether or not there were another 3 warning shots fired?
Not that I could think of.
Yeah, because Nicole Robinson witnessed them, did she not?
The warning shots. Yeah.
Yes. And Diane Housley heard them,
Okay.
and we've yet to call another witness that we believe will verify that. But there does not appear to be any dispute that in addition to the 2 warning shots that Mr. Wayne Greenlaw fired, that there were 3 warning shots fired in addition to that by someone.
Oh, I don't know about that. I thought you were referring to the 2. As far as I know, there was only the first set of warning shots.
Okay, so that's what I'm getting at. So, and maybe I was just wording the question badly. You know that Wayne Greenlaw said that he fired 2 warning shots, and there's no doubt that he did.
That's what he said.
Okay. Are you aware that Nicole Robinson has testified that in addition to that, she saw 3 other warning shots?
No, I'm not aware of what she testified to.
You interviewed her.
She was interviewed. I did not personally interview her. But yeah, she's interviewed and I've listened to her interview.
And she made a 911 phone call.
Yes.
And there's a transcript of that 911 call. Okay. So the bottom line is, whether there was 2 or whether there was 5, there were warning shots fired out there.
Right.
The issue, from your perspective, is what happened after those warning shots. Would that be a fair statement?
I would say it would be part of the issue.
Okay. What other part of the issue is there from your perspective?
Why the Greenlaws came out of their house with firearms to begin with.
Okay, and I understand your issue, and I think you addressed that with Mr. Ray Greenlaw, and he gave you an answer. I think Mr. Wayne Greenlaw may have also given you an answer to that question, right?
Yes.
Okay. After the warning shots were fired, based on the evidence that you know, is that when Mr. Riley and Mr. Leverett, in fact, left the property?
There's 2 different versions of that. One's that they, like Ray Greenlaw initially said, was that they took off immediately after getting struck with after Mr. Riley got struck with a machete. The other version would be that they didn't take off till they stayed in the yard after he got struck with the machete, and they didn't leave until Wayne Greenlaw came out with the rifle.
And as an officer, an investigator, when you're looking at 2 different potential versions of something, particularly in light of the fact that they may be positions put out by someone who may be suspects in a case, would it be fair to say that you would look at the independent evidence that is not associated with them to perhaps make a decision about what happened?
I would say we would look at all the evidence.
Sure you would. And in this particular case, there has been an independent witness testify to that. That would be Nicole Robbins. And is there any reason why you would have some reason to doubt Nicole Robinson's testimony?
I wouldn't doubt her testimony. I would just say that we're talking the early hours of the morning where it's pitch black outside, and I don't believe she can call out some features. She didn't recognize it as a machete. She recognized it as a baseball bat. So while I would say that that her statements, her interview, and what she saw holds weight, I wouldn't say it's the end all be all.
Well, I don't disagree with you about that. You have to evaluate every person's testimony and statements in light of other facts in the case, don't you?
Yes.
One of the things that is in her statement is the fact that she saw 2 people leaving, going down the street after the 2 warning shots were fired because they were illuminated by the headlights of the Jeep that was pulling in at 538.
It was my understanding that the Jeep was already there. Even like I said, some of her recollection I think might be a little bit off.
Okay. So, bottom line is, warning shots are fired. Riley and Leverett leaving the scene. And they may have left it slightly before the warning shots were fired, but at an absolute minimum, they left after the warning shots were fired. Would that be fair enough?
Either after the machete or when Wayne came out of the house with the gun.
All right, so now that gets us to what happened down the street, right? And are there witnesses that you are aware of that can tell us what they saw happen down the street?
There are witnesses that can tell us, what they saw from their perspective.
Okay. And would Kurt Madison be one of those?
Yes, sir.
And would Daniel Medow be one of those?
Yes, sir.
And would Marianne Fitzgerald be one of those?
Yes, sir.
Okay. So, independent of whatever it is that Mr. Wayne Greenlaw may have said in his interview, there are other people that independently out there had observations of what happened out there. Is that right?
Of portions of it. I don't think there was anybody that had eyes on the whole thing and saw it from start to finish.
Agreed. The events were happening on 2 ends of the street, weren't they?
Right.
For people people up on the east end had the observations from the east end, the people down on the west end had the observations from the west end, and then 13 had observation, excuse me, 13 had observations from 13, and that's where Daniel Meadow was, right?
Yes, sir.
And based on your knowledge of this case, Mr. Meadow had a lot to say about what took place out there, did he not?
He did.
Okay. And in reference to whether or not there was a shotgun fired by Mr. Leverett in this case, Mr. Meadow weighed in on that, did he not?
He did make a comment about a shotgun being fired.
And as a matter of fact, when he observed that shotgun being fired, he was, according to him, within 8 to 10 feet of it.
I don't believe he said he saw the shotgun being fired. From my recollection, he said that he thought he heard a shotgun fired, and then he said, or it could have been Brian yelling at them. And I believe the interview that the investigators we did with him, that they touched on that again, and he said, well, it was probably him yelling.
Mr. Meadow testified in this case, and of course, as the detective in this case, you were not, and since you were going to testify, you weren't able to be in the courtroom to hear that testimony. But the bottom line is, he weighed in on that subject. And are you aware of whether or not at this point in time he in fact did testify that he saw the shotgun being fired?
I'm not aware that he said he saw it being fired, no.
In his original statement to the police, are you aware that he said he saw the shotgun being fired?
I don't remember him saying he saw it being fired. I believe that he was in the back of the house, and he said that he thought he heard the shotgun fired where he heard Brian yell. And I believe he said he saw him with the shotgun at the end of the driveway, but I don't believe he said that he saw him shot the shotgun.
And the bottom line is, you didn't take that statement, and so you don't know if that's what he said or not, but the bottom line is he's testified here in court, we'll just go from there. So at the end of the day, during the course of this statement, Mr. Wayne Greenlaw said on a couple of different occasions that he believed that he returned fire. Did he not?
Yes, he said return fire a couple times.
And when asked a bunch of times to get to the answer, whether or not he saw a gun, at some point in time, on a couple of different occasions, didn't he say that he thought he did?
I think that's exactly what he said, that I thought.
So, in his statement, he testified he thought he saw a gun, and in addition to that, there were some comments in reference to questions that you had asked about whether or not he had heard something from the person who had the shotgun. Do you remember that?
I believe so.
And specifically that he believed that he heard him say something. Now, as the case agent in this case, are you aware of other witnesses that would in fact support the proposition that in fact Mr. Leverett did say something?
Yeah, I believe so. I want to say that was Danny Meadow, or maybe it was Kurt Matheson, one of the two.
In watching the statement that was played a number of times, it appeared to me, and my question is, it did appear to you that Mr. Wayne Greenlaw was jumping from the beginning to the end, to the time that he actually went into the garage?
Oh, the carport.
Yes, Carl.
Yes, yes, I'm with you.
When you'd ask him a question, and instead of answering the questions in front of it, he was telling you about what happened after the shots were fired as opposed to what happened before the shots were fired.
Well, I know he mentioned going up into the carport, but, you know, we also covered what happened before.
No, you did. But there were several different times when you asked him questions where it appeared that he may have gone ahead and jumped ahead and said, I went into the carport. Now, I'm asking if that's your recollection.
Yeah, probably.
Okay. There doesn't really appear to be a dispute from your perspective about the angle of fire, does there?
As far as where he's saying he shot
Yes.
from?
No, from where the evidence says that he shot from.
No, not that I'm aware of.
Okay. He, at no time during the course of that interview, did he not deny that he in fact fired shots?
No.
So, he didn't deny that he fired the warning shot.
Correct.
He didn't deny that he fired the shot.
Correct.
He told you that it never was his intent to kill him.
Yes.
He testified on several different times during the course of that he was either in fear for himself or his brother or his mother. Did he not?
Correct.
I believe he also testified in the statement that he believed that he was shot at.
I believe he said that he thought that they were going to return fire.
Or misquote. Could you go over to page 45, please? And look at lines 4, 5, and 6. Your question to him was, did he shoot at you?
I said, you talking about line 4?
Yeah, actually, well, you can start whichever. Yeah, start at line 4, sure.
Okay. I said that Wayne, I said, you say you returned fire. Did he shoot at you? And Wayne said, that's what I thought. And I asked, what made you think he shot at you?
Well, my question to you was, did he tell you
Oh, yes, he did.
that he thought that he was shot
Yes.
at? And if there was another witness that had testified in this case that in fact he had been shot at, would that support his statement?
Objection calls for a call on credibility.
Sustained.
Do you recall him in his statement testifying that he thought the other person had a gun?
I believe he was saying he thought they had a gun because of the discussion about guns in the house. I don't believe he ever said that he saw a gun.
No, I agree. I didn't say that he saw a gun. My question was, did he tell you that he thought the other person had a gun?
Yeah, he said he thought.
person have a gun?
He was found to have a shotgun, yes.
Do you remember during the course of the statement that Mr. Wayne Greenlaw says that I'll word this correctly, that in reference to the other gentleman firing a gun, that he didn't remember who fired the gun first, the other gentleman or him?
I believe you're correct there.
Investigator Ford, thank you very much.
Cool.
Mr. Mott, cross-examination on behalf of defendant Ray Greenlaw.
Yes, sir. Good afternoon, investigator.
Afternoon.
Now, that video that we just saw, both of Wayne and Ray, those are all the statements of any significance that either defendant made to you in this case, correct?
Correct.
So the jury's heard all of that evidence as far as their statements go. That's a fair statement.
Yes.
And obviously, the jury just witnessed the interviews, and we all did. And just want to ask you a couple of, just boiling it down, are fair statements of what we just witnessed. Now, particularly with Ray's, there's probably around 18 times or so throughout Mr. Ray Greenlaw's interview that he indicates, on at least 18 occasions, that he's threatened or scared. That'd be a fair statement?
I don't know the number, but yeah, he mentioned it a lot.
A number of times. You wouldn't dispute that number?
No.
Okay. And also, as far as reference to defending himself, his mother, or his brother, you wouldn't have any dispute with him saying that around at least 13 times. That sounds about right.
Yes, I would dispute it.
And as far as whether or not the individuals, Mr. Leverett and Mr. Riley, left number 9 Aspen and then returned back at some point and left before the machete incident, that he made reference to that version of events on at least 12 occasions, and was consistent with them leaving and coming back before the machete attack or incident occurred.
Yes.
That's a fair statement?
Yes.
12 times, okay. And then on one occasion, I believe, he was asked about 911, and he basically said, look, we knew all these gunshots went off. We knew the police were on their way.
As well as saying they just didn't think about it.
Now, would it be fair to characterize Mr. Ray Greenlaw's version of events as pretty much two versions? One version where he has a gun, and one version where he doesn't have a gun. That'd be a fair assessment of those?
Sure.
Okay. Because everything else in all material respects pretty much remains the same. It's just there's one version where he has the gun and one version where he doesn't have the gun. But as far as Mr. Riley coming back and the order of events and these sorts of things and his state of mind, that all remained the same. Wouldn't you agree?
As far as I recall.
Okay. Would you say that's a fair statement, more or less?
Sure.
And you had mentioned that there were two versions, and it did, it took a little bit of work to get out that he had, in fact, had the 9mm, correct?
Correct.
But eventually he came out with it.
Yes.
And you said that there were two versions of when Mr. Riley and Mr. Leverett left after the machete incident. One where there's the machete incident and they both run,
Right.
and that was given by Mr. Ray Greenlaw. Would you agree with me that that version comes when Mr. Ray Greenlaw is not being entirely truthful about whether or not he possessed the gun?
Yeah, that's when he initially told us, yes.
Right, so it's the first version that where the machete incident happens, and then the two individuals just take off. That's consistent with him not admitting to being in possession of a gun.
Correct.
Okay. And then after he admits to being in possession of the gun, his version of events remains consistent throughout, that the machete incident occurred, they still weren't leaving, and it took the warning shots to get them to leave the property.
I believe it was Wayne coming out of the house with the gun that took him to leave the property. I believe Wayne fired off the shots while they were fleeing, is my understanding.
Okay, all right. But that version of events, the warning shots, well, so now, hold on now, because then that would be the same version of events, wouldn't it? Would it not? That it would be the machete incident, and then running, that's the same whether or not they're running while the warning shots are going off or not. So is there just one version from Mr. Ray Greenlaw about when Justin Riley and Brian Leverett left, or are there two events?
There would be,
I'm sorry, is Brian